Well, we're on the other side of it, aren't we? Episode 201 of Common Knowledge, the show where I take a look at 10 common Magic the Gathering cards and tell you if they're any good in the Pauper format or not. 201, we've got a new mountain to climb on the road to, I guess 250 is like a cool milestone, right? But, we're going to get all the way to 300. Probably. Anyway, let's take a look at our first card, see what episode 201 gives us. We'll start with Hedron Blade, single mana, generic mana. For an artifact equipment, equipped creature gets +1/+1. And whenever equipped creature becomes blocked by one or more colorless creatures, it gains Death Touch until end of turn. Interesting. And it equips for 2. So this is, in some ways, a much worse Leonin Scimitar or a Short Sword, because those are 1 mana equipments that give you +1/+1, but only equip for 1. So those are better in some ways. But this gets a conditional Death Touch. How many colorless creatures are you really coming up against in the Pauper format? I mean, there's some. Don't get me wrong. We have Tron decks are playing the Maelstrom Colossus and the Boulder Branch Golem and some things like that. You're gonna see Mirror Enforcers in something like an affinity list. There's colorless creatures out there, like Wretched Griff, I suppose, gets played in some decks. Any Eldrazi spawns. In fact, Eldrazi, most of the Eldrazi that have Devoid, so like Writhing Chrysalis is a colorless creature, despite costing Gruul mana to cast. So there are some things that work with this. Are they prevalent enough that you need to have an equipment that is pretty garbage if you're not coming up against colorless creatures? I don't think so. It's cool though. I like the art. I like this sword itself. I just think that looks rad. But as a card I would play in Pauper, nah, not really. Let's go for a. I think this has to go like all the way down to the 1s. It's just so narrow for usefulness, and the other cards that are more generic versions, like the Short Sword, like the Leonin Scimitar, they're just better, and those also don't ever see any Pauper play. So I think you got to dip down into the 1s. We'll go for like a 1.7 on this one. Next up is Wolf Cove Villager, a single white mana for a 2/2 human peasant, not present. 2/2 human peasant, and this creature enters tapped. It is in some ways, a better Savannah Lions. It's not a better Savannah Lions. Savannah Lions enters untapped, and I think that probably makes a real difference. Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't make that much of a difference. What are you blocking with your Savannah Lions that you're missing out on with a Wolf Cove Villager? If there's like a 1/1 with haste, if they have like a Reckless Goblin. Is that what it's called? Reckless Goblin? What am I thinking of? Reckless Goblin. There is no Reckless Goblin. What am I thinking of? Anyway, there's a 1/1 Goblin with haste. In fact, I think there's a couple of them that cost a single mana. But you're not blocking that with your Savannah Lions, so maybe it's fine that this creature just enters play tapped. That's really for turn 1 though. Outside of turn 1, I think this is probably just a worse Savannah Lions. You'd rather have the creature be untapped to be able to trade with something later in the game. On turn 1, you don't mind as much and then you untap with the 2/2, so that's pretty cool. I don't know if this card is necessarily good enough to see play. We've also I think there's a black card. I don't know if it's a skeleton or a zombie. I think it might be a zombie that enters play tap, but it's a 1 mana 2/2 as well. And it's cool. These are neat things. I like that we're trying to find ways of making side grades to Savannah Lions, and I think this is a way of kind of doing it. But I don't know. I don't think it's quite there. It's cool that it's a human, which is a good creature type. Peasant doesn't really get you anything as a creature type, but kind of interesting. Also, we get a little, not errata exactly, but what does it say? The non-tutorial printings of some cards from the Avatar Beginners box tutorial decks were only available in collector boosters, making them foil only. Ooh. Still only a quarter if you get that version, but the normal version is 14 cents. Nobody really cares. I mean, could this go in a white weenie deck? Could this go in a pack beast deck? I guess probably not, especially not a pack beast deck where you want your creatures to enter untapped, so then you can tap them with the spring bloom or spring leaf drum um, to be able to get you more mana. So a creature entering tapped really doesn't help that deck. Still, I don't know. Well, 1 mana 2/2. That's a really good rate, even if it comes into play tapped. I think we can go for a 2.3. It's still basically just a vanilla creature, and even though the stats are pretty good, it's got enough of a downside. You have better stuff you can play in the Pauper format or in most formats. Hunter's Blowgun. This has seen a little bit of play in the Pauper format. Single generic mana for an artifact equipment that equips equipped creature gets +1/+1. Sounds a little familiar to a card we've seen earlier. But equipped creature has Death Touch during your turn. Otherwise, it has Reach. That's a lot better than the Hedron Blade. And it also equips for 2. So this is very equivalent to the Hedron Blade. Very, very simple comparison we can make. The same mana cost, the same equip cost, the same buff for +1/+1 stats wise. They both give Death Touch for different reasons, but this one is a much easier hoop to jump over, which is it just has Death Touch on your turn. Great. It has Death Touch 50% of the time. And the other 50% of the time, it has Reach. So it's not bad on defense either. I think this is really cool. This has seen a little bit of play. I'm trying to remember the exact decks that play it, but you could play this in like a Jund. I mean, you probably wouldn't play it over the black card that gives your creature Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn and investigates. Why can't I remember the name of that card? Doesn't matter. You know the name of the card, or you can find it. But like that, you use on the Krark Clan Shaman. You could. It wouldn't be at instant speed, but you could use this with the Krark Clan Shaman and be able to have Death Touch on your turn, so you can use the same kinds of things. This is a good way of giving a creature reach in a color that might not be very good with flyers. So red decks or green decks. Green decks have other creatures with reach though, which is fine. But an equipment that gives a little buff and gives your creature reach on defense is pretty nice. But it also is nice that it has some usefulness on the offensive side of the board as well, being able to give your creature Death Touch. I think this is a totally fine card. Has seen a little bit of play, hasn't seen a whole lot of play recently, but I think it's a totally viable card for the Pauper format, and I will give it probably just outside of playability, knowing how the format is right now. But I think you can still go for something like a 4.7 on this one and feel pretty good about it. Not a bad card. Outrider of Jess is 3 and a blue for a 2/2 human knight with Exalted, which means whenever a creature you control attacks alone, that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Doesn't have to be this creature, could be this creature, but any creature you attack with, any one creature you attack with, will get all of the Exalted triggers. And Exalt stacks too, so if you have a bunch of different creatures with Exalted, they will each give their +1/+1 to the one attacking creature. That's kind of cool. The problem, though, is if you're playing a lot of creatures, why aren't all of them attacking? This guy's a 2/2. Why would you not attack with your 2/2 and instead just let one guy attack and give it +1/+1? That's less. Isn't that worse? There's some reasons that you'd want to play it like keep this guy back. This guy can block. You're still getting some extra power when you attack alone. Maybe the creature that attacks alone gets enough power and toughness that it can't be blocked as easily. But if you tried to split that over a couple creatures and have your 2/2 swing in and your other guy swing in, maybe they can block one of them. Maybe they wouldn't be able to do that if they have the Exalted trigger. Maybe the creature that's getting exalted has trample, so it's going to be able to use its power more effectively and efficiently than the Outrider of Jess, which has no other abilities. Lots of reasons to consider an exalted creature. I don't think paying 4 mana for a 2/2 makes a whole lot of sense, even if it is giving exalted. This kind of just goes in again. I don't go here. I stopped playing Magic right before Shards of Alara, so I don't know a whole lot about this set. But again, every time I look at this set and look at a card from this set, I go, was Shards bad? Like, is this just a bad set for Magic the Gathering? Because I have not been impressed by most cards from Shards of Alara. Art's very pretty though. That's something. Hmm. Anyway, I think this is kind of bad. I'm going to give it a 2.2. 2.2. Feel okay about that. Springing Tiger. Look at this guy. 3 and a green for a 3/3 cat with threshold. This creature gets +2/+2 as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. Couldn't be clean. Well, it could be cleaner. It could just be a vanilla creature, but this is clean. This is clean Magic right here. 4 mana for a 3/3. Not a fantastic rate. You feel bad about playing that, but the idea here is you could potentially have a 4 mana 5/5 if you set it up right. If you have some ways of doing some self milling or self sacrificing to put a bunch of stuff in your graveyard, maybe you're playing some kind of spell slinger that plays a bunch of spells and they go all in your graveyard. We see plenty of Pauper decks do this. Mono Blue Terror is a deck that is basically about getting threshold or even more than threshold to turn your Tolarian Terrors and your Cryptic Serpents online. Or we have black decks that will delve for like Gurmag Angler and things like that. We have a lot of decks that care about the amount of stuff that you put in your graveyard. This is green's take on it, you could we certainly have green decks or decks that at least play green that care about the graveyard stuff. We have plenty of dredge decks. There's, oh god, what Malevolent Rumble, man. I was like Momentum Breaker. No, Malevolent Rumble puts 4 cards in your graveyard and you can get one of them back, but that's putting a lot of cards in your graveyard. Town Greeter puts a bunch of cards in your graveyard and you can get one of them. Circle of the Land Druid is the same thing as a Town Greeter. We have a lot of a lot of green cards that can put cards in your graveyard and then could turn on a creature like this. The problem, of course, as you might guess, is this is a 4 mana 3/3 or 5/5, but it's vanilla other than that. There's no trample on this thing, there's no evasion of any kind, and a 4 mana 5/5 is a little bit pedestrian in this format generally. And you need it to do something a little bit more. It's just not good enough to have a vanilla 5/5, even if it's for 4 mana. It's too slow in this format and not impactful enough. Art's cool, the idea is cool, but it's just not quite there. We got to give this a 2.8. That's even too high. 2.5. Even that's probably too high, but we'll go with the 2.5. Manticore of the Gauntlet is 4 and a red for a 5/4 Manticore. When this creature enters, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature you control. This creature deals 3 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. Interesting. Not particularly good. A 5 mana 5/4 is okay. I don't hate those stats, I suppose. Pretty vanilla after that because this enters trigger, once it's on the board doesn't really matter. So it is just like a 5 mana 5/4. But the enters trigger it's tough. We Lorwyn Eclipse wasn't that far long ago, so we have the blight mechanic in there, which is putting -1/-1 counters on your own guys. And then those guys generally have ways of taking those counters off and getting some kind of extra value for it. So in a way, this guy can synergize with those, and you're getting a way of dealing damage to an opponent. 3 damage is 3 damage. That's not bad. Plus, you get a 5/4 on the board. Now, the thing is, if you're playing this on a naked board, you or at least you don't have any other creatures, you got to put the -1/-1 on this guy, which turns him into a 5 mana 4/3. And that starts to feel kind of bad, even if it does 3 damage to the opponent's face or a planeswalker, but we don't have those in the Pauper format yet, anyway. But I don't know. I guess it's bad. When you think about it, it is probably just bad. But it does get the gears turning that if you can find something that uses the blight mechanic in a way that these guys would do something together, and Again, 3 damage is 3 damage, but also to that same effect, 5 mana is 5 mana, and that's a lot, especially in red, which can play a lot of stuff a lot faster. Probably doesn't need to get to 5 mana to be able to kill somebody. So I don't know if it's a card that you're really actually going to play with. Let's go for a 2.4. Fill with Fright is 3 and a black for a sorcery. Target player discards 2 cards and you scry 2. Okay. Originally from Fifth Dawn, which I guess makes sense. Scrying was started in the Mirrodin block, so yeah, okay. 4 mana to discard 2 cards, 4 mana for a Mind Rot. That's I don't think I necessarily want to do that. Mind Rot itself is 3 mana, so is a Scry 2 worth a single mana to you? I'm not sure that it is. This is pretty overcosted, I would say. And I mean, you can't make it any cheaper because it just makes Mind Rot useless. So I get that it costs 4, but I don't think a Scry 2 is worth 1 extra mana. So I don't think this goes anywhere. We have plenty of ways to make people discard cards in the Pauper format, and they're all way more efficient than a card like this. You know, you could play Wrench Mind, which is also from Mirrodin, and that's double black to potentially make an opponent discard 2 cards, and that's a really good deal. So I think in comparison, this is just not very good. And you end up giving it something like a 2.1. Go for a 2.1. Keldon Halberdier is 4 and a red. A lot of expensive cards today. Well, I suppose we also got those equipments that were pretty cheap. 4 and a red for a 4/1 human warrior with first strike, and it has suspend 4 for a single red mana. So, rather than cast this card from your hand, you can pay a single red and exile it or exile it with 4 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, you remove a time counter, and when the last is removed, you may cast it without paying its mana cost, and it has haste. A lot of people forget that the suspend cards have haste when they finally do get casted. This one's a little tougher for me because I like a turn 1 play, even if you're not going to get the value out of that until like turn 5. It's red wants to be fast, so you kind of want to have a good turn 1 play. You don't always, though. You don't always have to have a turn 1 play. And it does feel like a bit of a waste, but turn 1s generally feel like a bit of a waste. They can anyway. You have plenty of tapped lands that you'd play on turn 1, knowing that you don't want to play it on, any subsequent turn because you want to be able to play everything else on curve. But some decks really do appreciate getting ahead on turn 1 and playing a spell. And this card is a card that needs you to be comfortable both playing untapped lands on turn 1 so you can then play this guy. So you're not going to be playing more of your tapped lands then. But also you're not getting the value of having a turn 1 play until turn 5. And that can also feel bad. This guy is pretty good once he gets on the board, though. Yeah, he only has 1 toughness, but he has first strike. So in combat, you kind of don't care what his toughness is. Now you care when it comes to like an End the Festivities or an Electrickery or something like that. There's plenty of ways for an opponent to kill this thing outside of combat. But in combat, this guy's tough. Like he blocks really nicely, he attacks really nicely. This is pretty darn solid. And on turn 5, like we mentioned, when this thing gets its last time counter, and it could be earlier than turn 5 if you have ways of manipulating time counters, and there are ways to do that at common, like clock spinning and that kind of thing. When this guy gets on the board, he'll have haste, and so you can immediately swing in with this 4-power first striker. And your opponent's probably not going to want to block against it, because they probably will lose whatever creature they have, and that's a big 4 damage coming in. And remember, on turn 5, you're not spending any mana to cast this guy. He comes in for free because you already spent the mana on turn 1. That's pretty good. Now, if you don't cast this guy on turn 1, he feels really bad to cast on turn 2 or turn 3 or even turn 4 if you haven't ramped up. Because then you're having to wait a long, long time for him to actually get on the board. And the game might be over by then. So he really needs to be a turn 1 play, or he needs to come out on turn 5. But you're going to feel pretty bad about playing him for his full mana cost. I don't want to pay 5 mana for this 4/1 first striker. It's just kind of not good enough. It is good enough if you can hang around long enough to make this guy come out on a turn 5. Sure. But how many decks are you playing? Like, how many red decks that are controlling the board that also want this as a turn 1 play? It's probably very few. I haven't seen one, and I don't know if you have either. A cool limited card though, for sure. I do like this card. I just don't really like it for the Pauper format. So I'm going to go for, I think I'm actually going to give it a 3. And that's probably too high, but there is something about, I do really like these suspend spells that you can cast on turn 1, or that you can pay for on turn 1, even if you don't get to cast it until later. Search for Tomorrow, I think, is a pretty cool, from a commander perspective at least, is a really cool play on turn 1, because it puts a couple of suspend counters on what is essentially a rampant growth. But a rampant growth that you can play on 1, even if you don't get the benefits of it until like turn 3, still it's a turn 1 play, and that's cool. You don't, so a lot of people will discount turn 1 plays. You can't play anything really that effective on turn 1. But there are some cards that you kind of can, even if you are kind of giving up your turn 1 to do it. Like a card like this, you will eventually get a pretty good creature out of the deal, and you only spent 1 mana. That's really good value. You just had to wait for it. Some people don't like to wait. I understand. Next card, Snarling Undurok, is 2 and double green for a 3/3 beast. You can pay 2 and a green, and target beast creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I like that. That's fun. It also has Morph for 1 and double green. So you can cast it face down as a 2/2 for 3 mana, 3 generic mana, and you can pay 1 and double green at any time to flip it over. So you can turn your 2/2 into a 3/3, and if you have a ton of additional mana, you can also give this beast or any other target beast a +1/+1 until end of turn. That's kind of expensive. Like, that's a really expensive fire breathing if I've ever seen it, but it does give you toughness, so in that way, it's a little better than fire breathing. I mean, I just can't get excited by a 4 mana 3/3. I don't really like morph creatures. I know there is a modality to them, but I just find them to be very clunky and slow. And this ability, this extra ability this guy has, while it is fun that you can use it on any beast. So if you want to use it on this guy, I mean, you have one for sure. You have one target, but you potentially have other targets. And Onslaught had a big beast sub theme to it, so. In the Pauper format, we do have some beast decks that use the Wirewood Savage to draw you a bunch of cards, and there are some beasts out there that can be casted for very cheap by giving your opponent more life, I think. Something like that. So we do see some decks that use beasts, but even they don't use this card. So if they're not using it, I don't think anybody will. Hang on for a second. Woo, hello. I'm going to give this guy a 2. Just a 2. No more, no less. Is this our last card coming up? I think it is officially. And that card will be Freewind Equinaut. This is not a very good card, but it is by my favorite magic artist, Rebecca. 2 and a white for a 2/2 human archer with flying. And as long as this creature is enchanted, it has tap, and this creature deals 2 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. That is too many hoops. Too many hoops. 3 mana for a 2/2 flyer. I already don't like it. That's a lot of mana for kind of whatever stats. I can play a Glinthawk. Yeah, I know Glinthawk bounces something back, but in the Pauper format, that's often a benefit. So I already don't love the stat line. I don't love the mana cost. And then having to have this thing enchanted. Okay, but if I'm putting an enchantment on this creature, what enchantment am I putting on this creature that still wants it to, not swing in for damage? Because you want this thing to be enchanted so it can then do its tap ability to deal 2 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. But if you already have a flyer that's 2/2, the idea that, it's a flyer, it has evasion, you can swing in more. This thing doesn't have vigilance. So now I need to give it an enchantment that probably gives it vigilance so it can both swing in for damage and then tap to deal 2 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. And that feels like a couple more hoops than I really want to do. Yeah, there are plenty of enchantments that will give vigilance and can do it quite cheaply. There's vigilance, in fact, just the actual card called vigilance from Kamigawa. Yeah, Champions of Kamigawa. Enchanted creature has vigilance. You could do that. Single white mana. It's in the right colors. Now this thing can attack as a 2/2 and then tap to continue doing its 2 damage to attacking or blocking creature. Sure. Okay. You could. But there's better ways of doing this too. There's what are some other ones that give vigilance? Sentinel's Eyes? Isn't that a Oh, come on. Yeah, Sentinel Eyes. That gives +1/+1 and has vigilance, and that also costs a single mana, so this is just better than the vigilance one. And has a way of getting it back from your graveyard. So this might be an option, sure. There's stuff. There's stuff. But now this would be like the worst card in your mono white heroic deck if you're playing it with those other kinds of enchantments, and that's the deck that this really makes sense in. And yet this thing has no sort of protection for itself. It's pretty easy to just chop it down. I really don't like it. Love the art. Great job, Rebecca, as always. But this is just not my idea of a good Magic card, and I think it actively kind of goes against itself in many ways and forces you to deck build in a way that is not efficient and feels bad. I kind of gotta knock it a lot for how bad it makes decks. Even if the card itself seems okay, the way it makes you build a deck ends up being very detrimental. That I don't want to give it any sort of credit. So I think we got to dip into like a 1.6. It's not a good card, and not one I want to finish on. I want to do a better card than that. So we'll do a bonus card, which is Third Path Savant. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human wizard, and you can pay 7 mana to draw 2 cards, but it doesn't have to tap. So if you have infinite mana, this thing can draw your entire deck. That's cool. It's also a wizard and a human. Those are good creature types. Those can do lots of things. A 3 mana 2/3 that's on the ground, not very good. Those are pretty bad stats. So you probably are only using this as a combo thing. You have infinite mana, and now you draw all the cards that you need for whatever else you're doing with that infinite mana. And that part's okay. You got to give it some credit there. And also, you can use this at instant speed. So if you do have, let's say there's a scenario where you don't have infinite mana, but you can hold up 7 mana for some reason, and maybe your opponent doesn't play a card, or you don't have to counter anything or respond to anything on your opponent's turn. You just have a 7 free mana. I guess you can pay 7 mana at the end of their turn and draw 2 cards with this guy. But you're probably using infinite combo stuff with this guy instead. So I do need to give it some kind of credit for the infinite combo potential. There are easier combos in Pauper. This is probably not the best one, but still give it a little bit of credit. Let's go for a 3.3. I'll give it a 3.3 and feel okay about it. That is our 201st episode. It was some okay stuff. I think we can do better for 202. We'll see you then. Bye.